Today's episode of Professor Oddfellow's Penetralia is brought to you by the vacuum of infinite space encompassing all. You've tried everything, now you'll try anything. But have you tried nothing? Nothing is really something because it's the only thing that's a guaranteed non-thing. Forget about those good-for-nothing imitations and their empty promises. Their products have nothing on genuine nothing, now with saturated voids. So ask for nothing, available only from Nobody.
Oh, it's time for today's sing-along.
Poor Mr. What's-His-Name, you have my sympathy. Though you can't read my expression, as per the hardbacks by anon, I've read most everyone. Inscrutability hasn't a shrewd nobility, but my heart's pledged to nobody. I'm bewitched by nobody. Though I am wooed by the hoses, I send regrets to so's and so, asking the blanks to call it quits. I'll let my lonesome nobody take liberties. Not much rhymes with liberties. My you-know-whats are sure to please. He brings the neato to incognito, ambiguity's guru. I'm bewitched by nobody.
Weren't we expecting the What's-Their-Name brothers and Miss Such-and-Such?
Yes, but it turned out they had to be somewhere or other.
Admiral Nelson once revealed in a letter that he strongly resented being visited by a Lady Somebody and a Mrs. Somebody. We can all sympathize. All of us have experienced the blanket nuisance of people with genericized names. In literature, though, people with genericized names are the most interesting characters, tending to be offstage, unseen, and therefore all the more intriguing. Who could resist the fascination of Miss Somebody, mentioned but failing to appear in Locke's Simon the Jester, along with the unseen Mrs. Somebody Else? Miss Somebody may or may not be the grown-up version of Little Miss Somebody, the maiden name of Little Miss Nobody. And we mustn't confuse Mrs. Somebody Else with Mrs. Someone Else, mentioned in conjunction with a Mrs. So-and-so in Hood's treasure chest. Similarly generic named characters pop up, or more likely don't actually pop up, in sundry works. And let's not overlook the misters, such as Mr. Someone Else and Mr. Somebody or Other, the titular character in a work attributed to a somebody. But if you have more continental tastes, you might like to meet, or possibly never meet, French chef something or other. Melville also offers a French twist in Quick Curtain. Who knew that surnames like something or other and whoever it was were of French origin? Similarly, we have Monsieur Whatsit, a rhetorical straw man in Gielgud's Prinvest London. Meanwhile, up in Scotland, Macpherson alludes to a hypothetical Mrs. McSomeone. Do you like your genericized name served up with hyphens? Then you'll love Gordon Smith's After the Exhibition, which offers both a Mrs. whatever it is the woman's called and a Mrs. whatever she was called. Take care to note the discrepancies between these two names in capitalization and hyphenation, indicating that the two Mrs. Whatevers, like our own Messrs. Meow and Meow, are no relation. And Wytock goes all out in My Cup Runneth Over, introducing us to or perhaps never actually introducing us to, a Mrs. Something hyphenated. Thank you, Wytock, for putting the cherry on top of the hyphenated genericized formula, and our cup doth indeed run over.
November. Oscar. Bravo. Oscar. Delta. Yankee.
For fans of things, Ames the body on page 1 supplies not only a Elsa thingamajig, but also a genericized character who's a bona fide inanimate object, a stove model dubbed the Regulo Mark something or other. Like Elsa thingamajig, Clayson's Charlotte somebody or other has dressed up her genericized last name with a non-generic first name. It's akin to the mullet, or the typical Hollywood fake building, pairing a convincing front with a chicken wire back. But there are also reverse mullets. Caper writes, I suddenly saw Mrs. Kahana, Mrs. something Kahana. It's her given name rather than surname that's genericized. But the ne plus ultra may be Mrs. somebody, the titular character in a Wynne novel. She belongs in my family tree. Speaking of family trees, apparently aristocrats are permitted to retain their genericized names upon acceding to their titles. We observed this at the outset with the Admiral's Lady Somebody, so we'll score that in Nelson's column. A braggart in the aforementioned Brown Book boasts about his connections to Lord this and Sir Somebody that. In Dandy Gilver and An Unsuitable Day for a Murder, Macpherson refers to a Lady What's-Her-Name. Later in the same book, we encounter a Mrs. Somebody. So clearly, Lady What's-Her-Name is not the former Mrs. Somebody, because Mrs. Somebody is still Mrs. Somebody. Maybe Lady What's-Her-Name used to be Miss Someone. Where's my What's-His-Face's peerage? And it doesn't stop with earldoms. In Matthew's The Journalist, the Duchess of Something is actually the Duchess of D something. And a 1914 story in the Literary Digest manages to one-up the Duchess of D something by presenting us to the Grand Duchess of Something. Our emphasis. Finally, for fans of religious art, we have a Saint Somebody in his study. It's good to know that genericized characters have their own patron saint.
Penetralia land, ho, like an ampersand. Letters are connecting into a long hand.
Nobodies.